Jewish community in Dubai, right? That's got a nice ring about it. He's the president of the Jewish community in Dubai. And Ross and his dear wife, Ellie, who hopefully will join us shortly, have been living there for a while, for the last 7 years. And they have single-handedly built up a credible Jewish community, an active community with Shabbos services, with davening, with kashrut, an incredible kashrut caterer run by Eli, which we'll hear about in a moment. And I see that Rabbi Dovi Goldstein has joined us. He's the MD of the kashrut at our Beit Din, and has, as you mentioned just a short while ago, has been very helpful to you in terms of supporting the kashrut arrangements for your community. And we're very excited to be able to share with you on this particular juncture in history. It is a very historical period that Israel and Dubai are entering into at the moment. But the fact of the matter is that for those of you who haven't heard Ross's story yet, Ross, in fact, Ross and Eli were the pioneers, in a sense, of creating a proper Jewish community presence in Dubai. As Ross said to me earlier, the first Shomer Shabbos family in the Gulf states in who knows how long, maybe ever, and Shabbos, kashrut, learning, davening, laning, functions, Pesach Seders, even having an Ashkenaz and a Sephardi Pesach Seder. And I must say, it's been a great pleasure. The last 7 years, Ross and I speak often, and we discuss issues, shilas, all kinds of issues. And it's been a great pleasure and a great privilege to get to know Ross and Eli over the years. And we're so honored that you are making time to be able to share with us tonight. So the way it's going to work is that we're going to do a couple of questions, like an interview. And anybody who would like to put any question forward, Ross is happy to answer anything on a personal level, on a political level, which he'll also share with us a little bit later. Okay, so let's kick off. So Ross, perhaps just introduce us to your family, even though they're not physically present, but just tell us who are in your family and how you landed up in this incredible place of Dubai.
Will do. Thanks, Rabbi. And I just want to say, first of all, what a pleasure it is for me to be part of this. You and I have walked a wonderful journey together, Rabbi. And I remember actually the moment coming to your shul, shown actually just in the image behind you, and asking you whether I actually should go to Dubai. And from that point onwards, you really walked with Eddie and I every step. Whenever we had shiloh, whether it's personal ones or ones for the community, I phoned you and we discussed everything together. So it's lovely actually to share some of that with other communities in Joburg. And it's also wonderful to have Rabbi Dovi Goldstein join, who's been to our community, visited us and given us so much chizuk. To answer your question, Rabbi, so you, of course, were very instrumental in Eddie and I coming together, and you were obviously at a chuppah. So I'm married to Eddie Creel, who hopefully will join us later. We have two beautiful children, Evie and Izzy. Evie's 11, please God, will be bat mitzvah next February, just before Purim. And Izzy is going to be 13 on the 5th of Kislev and is doing the laning for Parshat Toldot. And we came here together. Why did we come? Because I work for a global French company with a head office here in Dubai. And I'd been coming here since 2008, not living, but coming here for periods of time. And eventually my boss said to me, you know, Ross, if you want to move your career, you have to be mobile. You can't just stay in South Africa. Why don't you come to Dubai? And he said that to me around 2011, and I spent 2 years saying no to him for obvious reasons, because we assumed, perhaps not incorrectly, that it's very difficult for a Jew to live in a Muslim country and in a place without Jewish infrastructure. So I said no, I kept saying no. And he was persistent, and eventually I said to Eddie, let's go take a look. And my boss, who is very well connected, managed to find some Jews who I phoned, and I got a sense of who was there. There were some Jews here, and they had sort of started an embryonic community. And we also went to the supermarkets and found that there was kosher food available. And I guess we decided to have an adventure. But we did take a risk. And I remember you saying that to me, Rabbi, when I asked you what I should do. You said this is risky. And because it was risky in terms of Eli and my, our Yiddishkeit as a family, I made a real solemn oath to myself that our coming here would in fact, not only would we maintain our Judaism, but we would intensify it and build it. And we actually have lived up to that. It was a solemn prayer that I made to Hashem. I actually said to God, please don't let this happen if that can't be realized. And it really has been realized in ways that we could never have imagined. And ultimately, if you say to me, why did I come here? At a superficial level, I came here because my work wanted me to be here. But at a deeper level, I do think that we had a destiny here. And that the fact that we were able to really be pioneers and build a Jewish community from scratch is the most beautiful thing I think that Eli and I have ever done. So it ended up being a real blessing. And I appreciate your warning to us in the beginning to make sure that we not only protected our Judaism, but enhanced it. And thankfully, we've been able to do that.
Ross, I believe that you and I have something in common in the following area. We both started a shul in our house. I can tell you that I remember vividly the one Shabbos when my daughter says to me, I'm sick of a shul in my house. She says, when I come out of my bedroom in the morning on Shabbos and I want to go to the bathroom, there's a strange man looking at me down the passage. I said, you're right. I said, I apologize, and it's time to move out of the house. So we actually moved out and we started building a shul next to the house, but outside of the house. And thank God it went from there. But I think that you and Eli actually kept the shul in your house for considerably longer than that. So could you tell us a little bit about the earlier days and how did it go and what were some of the struggles that you had?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing was that when we came here, there was no infrastructure for a minyan. There were no Sifrei Torah. There wasn't a place of davening. And more fundamentally, there wasn't an understanding of even whether that was allowed. If you're in Johannesburg, you can make a shtibel. You have to get a tour and you have to get some guys together and create a bit of energy, but you can do it, right? Nobody is going to stop you from doing it. We weren't sure if that was the case here. We weren't sure if it was unlawful. We weren't sure if we were going to get into trouble. So that was the kind of context. That was the first problem. The second problem is that there was no infrastructure. We didn't have even the basics. And we weren't really even sure about how to begin. And I remember we brought out a chazan for Rosh Hashanah in 2013, just when I arrived. And I remember chatting to him on the beach. We played some backgammon on Umsakim beach together. And he said, Ross, just have a davening every Rosh Chodesh. Just try once a month. Don't be ambitious. Just once a month is enough. And we actually didn't follow that advice. We decided, me and a dear friend, Alex Petterfront, who I'll tell you about in a moment, we decided we were going to start a davening together. He was davening in his house. I was davening in my lounge. And Alex said, look, let's just daven together. And we decided to make it regular. And I think that was the most important decision we took. And we know that in Judaism, setting aside a regular time for learning and davening is very, very fundamental. And that's the advice that we followed. So we started promptly at 9 a.m. And we also made another decision, which was to pretend we were davening with 100 people. And we went through the whole service. We sang it, and we did the Haftarah, and we couldn't lane obviously at that point, but we did the laning from a Chumash. And we actually practiced leading services for months and months, actually before we had a full minyan. And Alex, I'll just tell you about Alex quickly. He grew up in quite a Haredi community in Antwerp. And in a certain sense, he was an exile from that community. It was a very, very stark community. But he had this amazing Jewish background. And but he'd never lained. He'd never lained. And we had a bar mitzvah in the community in about 2014. And I brought in a laner from Israel. He was kind of okay. He wasn't a bad laner, but he wasn't sort of, he wasn't the best laner either. He was what we could afford. And I remember Alex sort of just watching him lane. And I actually saw that moment when the penny dropped and he realized that he could actually do it himself. And he then became our laner. And if you heard him lane today, you'd never imagine, that he hadn't done it, back in Antwerp. But that's how it started. It started with Alex and I. We got our first Torah from Marble Arch Synagogue on loan. I had to convince him that I was Shomer Shabbat and that I'd be able to look after it. And they had a million questions, where were we going to keep it? How were we going to show it covered? They had concerns about it. But I was able to convince them, thankfully. And that red Torah came in a golf bag. That's the sort of, were able to kind of sneak it into town. We weren't sure if we were allowed to bring it in. We were a bit worried. So one of our community members brought it in as in a golf bag. And a beautiful old red Torah with a red cover. And that, we housed it in my living room. I went to a furniture store and I found a very nice, smart cupboard that we turned into an Aron Kodesh. And it took us about a year to get a minyan, and we started doing the full davening with a minyan in the lounge, which was beautiful. And we were there for about 2 years, Rav. And eventually, of course, you tell the story about your daughter, but that's the identical story I had with Eddie, is that we were overwhelmed eventually. I mean, we had a Rosh Hashanah here with 60 or 70 people in our lounge. It was one of those Shabbat kind of, sort of 2 days of Yom Tov into Shabbat kind of situations. And we had 60 or 70 people in our house every day. And Eddie was overwhelmed. And we had exactly the same conversation that you had with your daughter. In fact, I'm glad that Eddie was not here to hear your story. And she kicked us out the house. She just said, look, this is impossible. I have no privacy. I can't enjoy Shabbat. Can't walk around in my house, and relax. As you said, because there's strangers there all the time. And that was good. She was completely right. And she's not even here to overhear me saying this. She really was right. Eddie's always very good with boundaries. So she kicked us out the house, and there was another villa close by to where we lived that was being used by a community member, and a Lebanese Italian Jewish man, very tall, quite intimidating character. And his wife and family had already returned to London. He was hanging on for a bit. And I said to him, look, I'll share the rental with you. And we just want to use the sort of downstairs area on Shabbat once a week for davening. And he said, fine, he agreed to it. And the community fell in love with this villa. It really, really became a real place, sort of our real home, a Jewish home in Dubai, where people could sort of really be Jewish and sort of let their hair down. And it became sort of iconic for us. And I'll tell you, I'll sort of fill you up, in with, where we are with the villa now, but it really did become iconic. It featured in newspaper articles and television programs and all sorts of things. But it was a very beautiful, Hamish, charming place, a place that Rabbi Dovi Goldstein has visited, and he felt the sort of wonderful energy of the space. And we went from strength to strength there. And, I'm going to stop talking, Rav, but you were involved in helping us design the mechitza and work out the height of it and, think about all the issues. But I always had one single criterion about that space. And I always said to you, Rav, simple question, would you daven here? Would you eat our food, etc.? That was my question. It had to be a place that was completely halachically sound. So that any frum Jew from any part of the world, whether it's Johannesburg or any other city, could come and daven with us, come to the kiddush afterwards and eat the food. That was the standard and the sort of criterion that we established. And you helped us to achieve it, Rav, through several conversations, questions, and things of that kind.
So Ross, there is one thing that's very different to having a minyan in your house or in a villa nearby. In your situation, that is that it happens to be in a Gulf country, a country which is obviously much more allied to the Muslim or to the Arab system or the countries over there. And even though it's had a kind of a friendly relationship with Israel, what was it like starting a shul, knowing that you are actually in the midst of a potentially hostile type of situation, or maybe slightly dangerous? I'm not sure exactly. That's welcome to Ellie, guys. Everybody, say hi to Ellie. Wonderful. We've been hearing a little bit about you, moving the place out of the shul out of your house after a couple of years, and just getting a bit of background to that. So wonderful. Thanks so much for taking our time to join us. Just back. Okay. So just back to the question. So were you like Marranos in any way? Could you give us a bit of background about how the Jewish community in your beautiful villa environment worked in relation to, you know, the government and the whole sort of background of that country?
Sure. So rather the most important point to mention, just for starters, is that the UAE has been really courageous and outspoken in opposing fundamentalism and violent extremism of any kind. And the result is that all the sort of organizations that we would be worried about in the Muslim world, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or the Muslim Brotherhood, all those organizations, actually, their functioning is unlawful in Dubai and the UAE. And we always drew comfort from that. We always knew that that kind of outlook, that kind of extreme Islamic politics was not allowed here, and that it went against the ethos and values of the country. So that wasn't the issue. I think the real issue is that Dubai is a very ordered place. It's a high functioning, very, very super first world city. And it's very law abiding. I mean, Eddie and I, of course, you know, come from Joburg. And it was a bit of a shock to the system for Joburgers to be in a city that is so law abiding. I mean, and it's very impressive, obviously. Nobody breaks the law here. You know, there's a level of honesty and trust, which is actually overwhelming. You know, if you're at the gym and you have to go take a shower, you wouldn't hesitate to leave your cell phone and your wallet and all your clothes kind of on a bench and take a shower, and you come back and it's still there. In the heat of the summer, Ellie and I will leave the car running with the keys in the ignition so that the aircon, you know, keeps the car cool while we sort of do go and run an errand. You know, you wouldn't dream of that being a problem. But the issue for us is, were we allowed to pray? That was really the issue. Were we doing anything unlawful? Did we have to get some kind of permission? How would we do that? So those were the concerns. And in the early days of our community, we were quite paranoid about that. I mean, I remember the one day we were in the middle of our davening and we were all obviously wearing our talit, and there was chumashim out and everything. And there was a knock on the door. And everybody just scattered, you know, out of the lounge and sort of dashed into the kitchen. And I took off my talit and I sort of went to the door, and it was the gardener who just wanted sort of a glass of water or whatever it was. But we were all sort of paranoid, and people would come into the lounge and they would sort of draw the curtains and close the windows and lock the door. And there was a real sense of kind of paranoia. But of course, it was also a bit exciting. You know, it was there was a sort of element of drama and frisson to it as well. But basically, what we needed to do, and just stop me at any moment, Rav, if I'm taking too long to answer your question. But what I felt I needed to do as a leader of the community was create relationships with the government as early as possible and as extensively as possible. We wanted to make it very clear to them that we wanted to obey the law, that we wanted permission, that we weren't being Marranos, we weren't being secret. And when I started, I noticed there was sort of an email group, which is a very fundamental resource for us with 30 or 40 names in it. And when people would speak about Israel, you know, they would say the Holy Land, you know, they would never use the word Israel. And if they were kind of going to speak about Yom Kippur, it would be YK or some sort of, you know, there was code words and all sorts of things. And I just said, no, we're not going to do that. We really want to be very open with the authorities about what we're doing. And I took every opportunity to reach out at every level to government leaders. And I have to say, it took a while. It was a while before I was able to establish those relationships. But we never felt that we were in kind of hostile territory, that it was dangerous, that there was the Muslim Brotherhood, anything of that here. So that was not a concern.
Okay, so I'd like to, with your permission, I'd like to ask Ellie a couple of questions. So first of all, Ellie, it's really remarkable what you've been able to achieve over there, in a sense, as the leaders of the Jewish community. I mean, that's really what you are. It sounds maybe a little bit pretentious, but it's not at all. And of course, you did it as a team, and you've done a lot. For those people who don't know Ellie, she's actually a sociologist by profession. She has a master's in sociology. She's done a doctoral thesis actually in conversions to Judaism. And she's quite accomplished, from an academic point of view. But in addition to that, you've had to become almost like the role of a Rebbitzin, I think, right? I know my wife doesn't like being called a Rebbitzin either, She actually rebels against that word. But I'm not sure what your feeling is, but could you tell us a little bit from your perspective as the wife, as the woman of the house, as a mother of children, what it's been like for you, these years of having to take on this incredible responsibility?
Well, it's when you listen to Ross speak, it's you get a picture in your mind that's kind of, gives you the impression that it was quite easy in a sense, even though there were challenges, it makes it sound like it was like a red carpet almost for us. But being the wife of someone who's so driven to make this happen is not always easy, especially when you're trying to establish a household in a different country and context, not knowing and not having family support around you and trying to build networks up at the same time. That's really difficult, so learning who to trust, who to go to for advice and that sort of thing is quite something. And when I'm referring to that, I'm referring really to, what schools are the best, where do you, if there's an issue regarding the children or the home, who do you turn to? Because your family's not here and you're coming without roots, so you are arriving completely new. So that's quite challenging. And then with building the community, I think Ross did tell you that it started in our living room. And when it got to a point where, it got too much, that's when I had to say no more. And, that ultimately was a good step because it helped to push the community to the next level. And it also meant that as a family, we could have a bit more privacy again. But in terms of me taking the role of the Rebbitzin, I never ever saw myself as that, I never saw myself in that. And I remember in the beginning, people would come and they would ask me all sorts of questions and I'd be like, why are you asking me? What, I don't know. How can I help? But so the thing is that it's difficult. I mean, it's a tremendous responsibility. It's a massive responsibility that you're carrying on your shoulders. And when you're going through it, you're just living your life. You're not actually aware of the responsibility that you have, it's only now in the last couple of weeks when, we've seen the response to this Israel-UAE treaty. And suddenly there's such a spotlight on us as a community. Suddenly then do you actually get the chance to reflect on what you've really achieved, and how far you've come. And it's in those moments that you can sit and sort of look back and think, wow, in the beginning, we were a bit scared to say we were Jewish. And, yes, we were hiding a little bit. And then later, we would giggle when someone came in and they would say the same things that we said 2 years ago, but now we know that it's not necessary to say those things, So it's like a progression, and each stage you move. And we've got to a point now where we're so far away from where we were when we got here, it's hard to even remember, in a sense, what it was like.
I'll tell a story quickly, Rav. The head of human resources at my company, a Christian woman, had a sort of a connection to Jerusalem or things Jewish or what have you. And when she was married, her husband gave her a wedding ring that had some Hebrew written on the inside of the ring, some sort of Hebrew letters. I don't even know what they said. And she was worried about bringing that ring into Dubai. She kind of had this worry that, somebody might look at her ring, and what if they were to look at the inside and see there was Hebrew letters? So there was kind of, Eddie's right. I mean, in those days, we sort of had no clue, what was allowed. And, when you come into Dubai and you apply to be a resident, you have to declare your religion. And every member of our community had a dilemma. What do you say? And so when it came to me, my company said to me, what do we fill in here? What do you want us to say? So I went to my boss straight away, an amazing lawyer from Mexico. And I said to him, his name is Fernando. I said to him, Fernando, I'm going to declare that I'm Jewish. And the HR people wanted me to say Christian, and I refused. I said, no, either we leave it empty or I say Jewish, but I'm definitely not saying Christian. And these are the dilemmas we had. How do you fill in forms? What do you tell people about yourself? And if they find out you're Jewish, is that dangerous? We had a mezuzah. Of course, we had a nice big mezuzah on the outside of our door. And our gardener, here in Dubai, you have to have a gardener who comes in every day to water the grass, because if you don't do that, the grass dies. And all members were coming to me and saying, Ross, how can you dream of having a mezuzah outside? You've got a gardener from Pakistan who's going to see it. It's dangerous. So, those were the sort of, that was our reality back then. And now, of course, with this amazing Abraham Accord, it's impossible even to imagine that, But that, Eddie's right. I mean, that was our, 7 or 8 years ago. None of this current sort of excitement and kind of openness and publicity about our community would have been thought possible.
If I can add to that also, the other thing is that with this experience, throughout the way, I'm not talking just about now, but every step of the way, you're meeting people that come here, and each person has a story. Each person has an experience. Each person brings something of their past and then creates a new future. And each one is so fascinating. Even for us living here, what we have been exposed to, the different people and their cultures, and, all Jews, of course, as well in our community. But even within that, just such a wide range of experiences in the UAE, that we can be sitting down talking to someone and they could be describing a UAE that we don't even know. It's a strange way to be, but it's but it's interesting for even for us.
And just to say, Rav, the community, our Kehillah, is really global Jewry. It's Jews from all over the world. We have Jews here from Brazil, obviously the US, obviously Australia, parts of Europe, countries that one's never heard of before, North Africa, Morocco, Iraq, Lebanon, Italy. And it's really incredible, Jews from every part of the world. And, when I was in Joburg, I was, I did my sort of security duty every sort of once a month. And we used to have this game that we played on a shift where we would see if we could spot who was Jewish from 100 meters away, just from the way that a person walked, or sort of, and we could do it, because, and I thought to myself, well, that's true because we're in Joburg. This is our family. These are our friends. Of course, you can spot a Jew from 100 meters away, but can you do that if a Jew comes from Brazil? Can you do that if a Jew comes from Geneva? Can you do that if a Jew comes from Sydney? And amazingly, you can. I mean, this has been one of the great revelations, is that there's something really, really universally. I think so. Maybe I'm exaggerating. We all sort of, obviously, when we were letting people into our community, we had to be careful. I mean, we were very security conscious, and we wanted to be sure that all the people in our community were genuinely Jewish. And the point I'm making is we never had a doubt. I remember the one time we were always very careful when people wanted the location of the villa, because we didn't publicize it. We had no sort of website, or we didn't want people to be able to Google us. So I was asking him questions, and he could see that I wasn't sort of comfortable yet that he was Jewish, and I wasn't yet revealing the location of the villa. And eventually what he did was he just sent me a picture of himself. And he was just so obviously Jewish, that was the end of the matter. And so there has been something like beautifully kind of reassuring about sort of Yisrael, you know what I mean? How we actually are all part of a one family, how regardless of the sort of Masorah that we have, regardless of the language we speak and the way that we daven and the siddur that we like to use and the kippah that we like to wear, the truth is that there's some deep, essential connectedness between us, regardless of where you're from. And that's been a wonderful revelation that's come out of our life here.
So Eli, Ross is almost starting to sound like a sociologist here, the way. So I wonder. Okay, so the bottom line is that you haven't spoken about one very important thing, and that is that no Jewish community can function unless there is food, right? Even just, by the way, a little anecdotal. Last Shabbos, we had our first Shabbos minyan in 5 months, as you know, most of South Africa. And we decided to have a kiddush, but you can't have a kiddush. It's against the law and it's not hygienic, etc. So we had little takeaway packets at the end, all sanitized with food inside it from Frangelica's that people could take home. So you can't have a Shabbos without a kiddush. That was our sort of answer to the kiddush. But Eli, what I want to do is, if you don't mind, I'm going to show you a picture. And I hope everybody can see. Can you see this picture? Boy, can you see it? No. Hold on. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to just describe what the picture is. And then I want you to tell us a little bit about it, Eli, because this is food. Okay, I have a picture over here where I think it's in New York. It's at the International Kosher Food Festival, or food, what's it called? The Food Convention. And we have a picture of Eli standing on the right over here. We have in the middle, I think he is the Consul General of the Emirates in New York. Is that right? And on the end is a guy in a blue shirt. He is probably from the OU or something like that.
He's from StarK. So
he's from StarK. Okay. Yeah. And Eli, could you tell us what you were doing at this very, very prestigious, most important food festival or food convention, kosher food convention last year?
Sure, absolutely. So about 18 months ago, I started a food business in Dubai called Eli's Kosher Catering. And that started out of my home. And really it was because we were the only kosher family that we knew of here. And when people were traveling through, they would reach out to us and ask for kosher food. So I would be sending kosher food. And yeah, it was November 2018 when there was a massive conference, interfaith conference, with a number of rabbis that came in from around the world. And the conference organizer had nothing to give them to eat. So they phoned Ross because they knew Ross by that stage. And Ross came to me and said to me, well, do you mind cooking? And he said, they'll pay you if you cook. So I said, okay, all right. Well, in that case, I'm happy to, And I cooked for the conference and it went really well. And from that, the requests started escalating and I started the business. And shortly after that time, I met Joel Weinberger, who is the guy in the photo with the blue shirt. And Joel is basically one of the business developers for StarK, which is one of the, the world's big kosher certifying agencies. And he travels through Dubai regularly and he goes to Pakistan and India and he sources kosher products and has them shipped back to the US. And when he came across my service, he was really very supportive and helpful. And he came to me a few months later and he said, listen, let me help you get your business onto the international stage. You've got a great story here. You're doing a great thing. Let me help you get more customers. I will sponsor you a stand at Kosher Fest. every year, Star K at Kosher Fest in New Jersey, they have a store. Well, they have multiple stalls where they invite their key clients or customers, and they showcase them to all the clients of Kosher Fest. Now, Kosher Fest is the biggest kosher festival, food festival in the US, and it's a business-to-business festival. So it's aimed at anyone who is looking for products to sell, distribute, supply, whatever. And I went there. I was the only one from the Middle East. I was also the only one representing an Arab country. And I went there and I had date cakes. I made Emirati date cakes, and I served Emirati coffee and gave spices away and that sort of thing, and had my big banners that are in that picture behind me. And I invited the consul from New York to visit me, the UAE Consul General to New York rather. And he came to Kosher Fest. And he was probably the only Muslim in the place. And he arrived and he walked around and he sampled all the kosher foods, and he came and he had a coffee with me, and we took that historic photo. And people were really thrilled. They were thrilled that, you know, he was there and what it could mean for the UAE. And actually that picture has been circulated quite widely in the press as well. Especially in a recent article, as one of the factors that facilitated this, you know, Israel deal. Not that me directly, but the fact that the UAE was open to Jews and open to the Jewish community. So that was quite an accomplishment for me.
In fact, Eddie's not exaggerating, because when Ambassador Taiba, who we know very well actually, and has been a big support of our community from the earliest years, he sent that article into Yediot Achronot when annexation was an issue. I don't know if you recall that. And he sort of communicated very directly to the Prime Minister and to the Israeli public and said, look what's possible if there's peace. And he said, you know, in the UAE, we even have a kosher caterer. He actually said that in that article, and he was referring to Eddie. So I have to say, we got a lot of nachat ruach from Eddie, and she actually, in a certain sense, really has made history in a very literal way, that he referred to her in that very important message that he put into the Israeli media.
So behind every peace deal, there's kosher food. That's what you're saying.
there's a Jewish woman making kosher food.
Yes. Okay, so I've got just two more questions that I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to open it up if anybody wants to ask you questions. I've got one question for Ellie and one question for Ross. Ellie, the question I have for you is, what's it like bringing up Jewish children in Dubai? And, you know, what do you do about their education? I suppose that's for Ross as well. And just give us a little bit of background, what it's been like for them. And, you know, without like a Jewish community, in a sense, for them to, are there a lot of other Jewish children? How does it work?
Well, in the beginning, they were the only ones really that we knew, and we had to build that up slowly. And, you know, as I said before, we were a bit nervous about what they could say at school. So we told them initially, don't say anything. Let us talk to your teachers. And we spoke to the teachers and we explained to them. And actually the first day of school, in the second year that we were in Dubai, we went to the teacher and we said, look, you know, if you're going to have any parties at school and there's going to be food, please, you know, contact me first, because we keep kosher, we're a Jewish family, and I will send food in for my son. And she looked at me and she said, oh, that's nice. No, I'm also Jewish. And, you know, so there's, it was very surprising. You know, we had to, the community of kids grew with us. And at various stages, there were more boys and there were girls, and now there are more girls than there are boys. And, you know, the age groups, Dubai is a very transient place. So you find that there's lots of young kids, like really young kids between the age of 1 and 4, but not so much at the Bati stage. So it gets harder as they get older. In terms of managing it with their education, it's just taken a lot of planning, thinking, But it's been quite easy because we're in international schools, and the teachers come from the US, they come from, you know, the UK. They're used to having Jewish communities around them. They're used to dealing with multicultural society, in multi, you know, with different groups. So it was easy to handle them in that context. I think if the kids had to go to an Arab school, there might have been other challenges, but they didn't. They were going to international English-speaking schools, so it was much easier. And we found that when we did reveal to parents that we are a Jewish family, you know, we got a lot of warmth, acceptance, and positive feedback about it. So, you know, we've never really felt any problem, but our kids were much younger. You know, there are other parents that said, you know, when their kids reached the middle school level, sort of the ages of about 10 to 12, you know, then other kids would start making jokes about the Holocaust, for example, and their daughters would get upset naturally, you know, but, you know, we haven't personally experienced that. So it's been a good ride for us. And in terms of Jewish education, they've been learning online, you know, so they have their schooling during the day. They come back and then they do Torah in the afternoon and Hebrew in the afternoon at different times of the week. And, you know, we keep up to it. And now they're both learning for their Bami and their Bati, and they're both doing really, really well. And, yeah, we can be proud of what they've achieved, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm to add to that, Rabbi, I have to say that I had to swallow very, very hard when we came here and Izzy and Evie went into a non-Jewish school. I never ever imagined that our children wouldn't go to a Jewish school. And that was a very tough thing. And I didn't feel good about it, I have to say, in the beginning. So what we did, and Eddie, you know, even when we were staying at a hotel and we hadn't even yet found a house to live in, I arranged for the children to be enrolled in a Jewish online school, a beautiful school set up by Chabad for their shluchim. And so the children, you know, had teachers and we were learning Torah, as Eddie mentioned. And then in addition, I became much more actively involved in their education than I would have been if they were at a Jewish school. You know, in all sorts of ways, you know, davening together in the morning at home, talking Torah on the way to school. The school's half an hour away. So I actually use that time to teach the children. You know, we actually do, you know, that's valuable time. We do all sorts of fun stuff. You know, on Shabbat, we have something called Shabbat chocolate, which is the end of the day. It's the last Shabbat treat of the day, when I'll go through the parsha with the children and, you know, sort of ask questions and sort of check their knowledge. And so we've had to be very, very active as Jewish parents in order to compensate for the fact that our children are not at Jewish schools. I do want to say that I think we have made a sacrifice in terms of content. I think I have no doubt at all that Jewish kids in Joburg have more Jewish content than our children have. But I do have to say, first of all, Izzy's just finished the laning for the whole of you know, Parshat Toldot. So that's quite an achievement. I'm very proud of him. But also I want to say that their Jewish identity and the strength of their identity has been amazing on everything, with kashrut, with being Shomer Shabbat. They really are sort of, have got a very, very strong, well-developed Jewish identity that has been honed, you know, through their experiences at, you know, in our home. And I think a very real sort of love of Torah. You know, before, when we put the children to sleep, we do the bedtime Shema with them. We've always done it for sort of, you know, from the earliest years. So we've been very, very active in as Jewish parents with our children, more so, I think, than had they been in a Jewish school. But this has been an issue that we've had to think about a great deal, and we've had to compensate for their not being in a Jewish school.
Sure. I must say that, you know, even though I've, in a sense, walked the journey with you, you know, through the years of discussion, I feel very humbled listening to everything that you guys have achieved and, you know, what you've been able to do, you know, in terms of community, in terms of the kids. Not an easy thing to balance that out and, you know, to get everything together. I know that building community requires countless hours and huge issues develop all the time on an individual level and so on. So really, I think Kula Kavod, it's absolutely amazing what you two have been able to achieve. I think you really should be very proud, and it's, as I say, I feel very inspired and very humbled at the same time listening to what you guys are saying. So I know that you spoke, Ross, on Sunday. You were part of the Chief Rabbi's webinar, and you did speak a little bit about the political implications. Could you perhaps share with us your vision about where you think things are going between Israel and Dubai, Dubai and the Jewish community, and just what do you see sort of coming out in the future, and how important is this development for us as the Jewish world?
You know, Rav, I think the big message, the big takeaway is the following. You know, we are Litvak Jews. We have no real experience or understanding of the Arabic world and the history of Jews in Muslim countries unless you've studied it. So when we arrived here in Dubai, we didn't really know the story of Jewish life in Muslim countries. And the truth is, historically, prior to the 1920s, certainly prior to 1929, the story of Jewish life in Muslim countries was by and large a positive one, by and large positive. And Jews generally fared much better in Muslim societies than in Christian societies. We are actually revered as a people in the Quran, as contrasted with the Gospels. We have a protected status as dhimmis, it's called in the Quran. We are considered to be monotheists, people of the book, so to speak. And that translated into a much higher level of comfort that Jews generally had living in Jewish countries and Christian countries. Everybody's familiar with the story of the Rambam, which seems very negative, of course. And we know his story, but the events that occurred in the life of the Rambam occurred in the outer edges of the Muslim world in Morocco, and it happened to be a particular group that was fundamentalist, but actually that was not the norm at all. So that's the first thing, is that the history is interesting, and it's worth delving into. That's the first thing I'd want to mention. The second thing I'd want to mention, which is really important, and you might have missed it if you weren't looking for it, is that these Abraham Accords are incredible. I mean, obviously amazing. But there's actually a bigger trend happening, not just in the UAE, but in other Muslim countries, of celebrating Jewish heritage, of standing up against Holocaust denialism, of reaching out in various ways to Israel and to Jewish leaders. And I can illustrate it. I mean, for example, Mohammed Al-Issa, who's the Secretary General of the World Muslim Council, went and had a visit to Auschwitz with David Harris of the American Jewish Committee. That event was riveting and was widely publicized in local media over here. And he stood up very, very strongly against Holocaust denialism. One example. Another example is that in Egypt, they are restoring their synagogues and Jewish cemeteries. There were 4,000 people learning Hebrew in various universities in Egypt. Quite incredible. In Bahrain, there is a Jewish woman called Huda Nunu, who's become a very close personal friend, who's the first Jewish ambassador of a Muslim country. She was the Bahraini ambassador to the USA. Oman recently in 2018 had Prime Minister Netanyahu as a special guest. Rabbi David Rosen visited Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. All of these things are happening. And it's an interesting trend. So whereas you see some worrying trends in Europe, where countries like Lithuania and Poland and Hungary seem to be revisiting their Holocaust past and venturing almost into the domain of denialism, or not fully owning up to their culpability. You see a completely different trend in the Muslim world, which seems to be about acknowledging the Holocaust, acknowledging and celebrating the Jewish history, and wanting Jews to come back, and almost encouraging Jews to come back. This last Ramadan, there was a program called Umarun, which featured a Jewish community in a Jewish family in Kuwait, and was kind of went viral for Muslims watching sort of TV during Ramadan. So what I'm saying is that there's a kind of a trend in the Arabic world, which seems to be completely in the opposite direction of Europe. And it's encouraging and it's hopeful. And we need to, in a certain sense, reassess our relationship to the Muslim world. There's a beautiful opportunity now with this Abraham Accord for us to reconsider what it means to be a Jew and a Muslim, what it means, what is the history of Isaac and Ishmael, what is the history of Jews in Muslim countries after the times of the Prophet Muhammad until the present. And we need to rethink this. You know, when Eddie and I left for Dubai, we got very, very negative reactions. Community members told us that we were going behind enemy lines, and you know, it was almost like a betrayal. And what I want to say is that the reality is not that. The reality is that there's potentially a very, very hopeful new possible future with Muslim countries. Speaking very briefly about this accord, I do want to say, Eddie and I have been overwhelmed about how positive our Emirati friends are about the accord. They are learning Hebrew. They can't wait to visit Israel. Eddie invited a friend of hers, a lady called May, who Eddie is working on a project with that she should really tell you about. May brought flowers, you know, blue and white flowers, to celebrate the accords. It's a love affair. You know, people are saying this is going to be a warm peace, but it's almost more than that. It sort of feels like a very exciting first date, you know, and so that's, you know, really, really thrilling. It looks like Bahrain, Oman, Sudan are not going to be far behind, and I think there really is a whole new reality. But we as Jews need to also reappraise our own ideas of Muslims. We need to investigate, we need to learn about it, and we need to open ourselves up to the possibility that we've also had prejudices and also seen Muslims in a way that was actually not who they were. And understandably, of course, given events in Israel. But I'm saying we also need to approach them too and open ourselves up to this reality. And I'm really excited and hope that people listening to this and just generally excited about what's going on will come and visit and see it for themselves.
Just by the way, the South African Jewish Report today, which just came out, the front page article was the Minister of Foreign Relations, Minister Pandor, and I didn't go through the article carefully, but she was sort of intimating that maybe South Africa has to really rethink its situation. In other words, South Africa was really a very, very strong opponent of Israel for all of these years, you know, certainly since the new independence. And she's sort of intimating that they may have to rethink, which is an incredible spillover effect. So who can tell what's going to happen? Ross, I think you'd be a great ambassador, you know, to go and represent the UAE and Israel, maybe.
I know, you know, the truth is that we do feel like ambassadors. I mean, we actually are very proud to be residents of the UAE, and we're very committed to the project that this country is pursuing, and we think it's beneficial and hopeful. I also want to say, Rabbi, that we also feel like ambassadors of South African Jewry, and I don't just say that lightly. You can tell, and I hope that the people listening can tell, that we've retained a very, very close kesher with our rabbis, with our Masorah, and we feel very proud of that tradition, and we represent it over here in Dubai. And Rav Dovi Goldstein knows about the projects we're doing that hopefully will bring prestige to the UOS and to South African Jewry. It was wonderful to be on the call with Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein. And those, you know, the Shabbat project is something that we're involved in. We're very proud South African Jews, but at the same time, I do have to say that we are proud UAE residents, and in a certain sense, are informal ambassadors for them.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ross and Elliot. It's been really wonderful. I'm going to ask if there are any people who want to put forward any questions, Q&A. And in the meantime, while you're busy sending your Q&A, if you want to, I'm going to ask Rabbi Shaw, who is the rabbi of a very Choshuva community, a very good friend, and the rabbi of the Santon community, who's doing an incredible job there, to give you a Rosh Hashanah bracha all the way from Santon.
Thank you.
How beautiful was that? Before any brachas, I'm telling you, I've been sitting here absolutely spellbound listening to the two of you. Ross, your dad was a legend in the city, and everybody knows him. Everybody knows he was involved in education, and it was just so uplifting to hear your story and what you're doing. And I have to tell you, I'm a homeboy. I love being at home, and I don't like to travel, but the truth is that we really can't wait for this whole cloud to disappear from our head, that we can just come and visit. I have some people in my community actually went recently and spent time in Dubai, and it was unbelievable. They came back with incredible reports. And a member of my community, in fact, he's listening tonight, he lived in Dubai for some time, and it was really, really wonderful. I have in my possession a letter from the ambassador to South Africa from the UAE, written to the Board of Deputies, of which I sit, and just the warmest letter to the Jewish community, and thanking them for, and embracing this whole process, this whole Abraham Accord and everything. It's just beautiful. So really, if there is any power that I have to bless everybody, I just bless you that this will be a year of success, a year of awesome, a year of peace, a year of health, a year of goodness, a year of incredible success in all you do. Bakol Mikol Kol, ad bli dai, without any limit whatsoever. And Hashem should inscribe you and all of us for a good and for a sweet year. And in fact, your nation and ours, all of Israel, the most beautiful, beautiful, sweet, delicious year. Apple dipped in honey, two things from the bee. You get a sting and you get the honey. We just say, please, only the sweet. Just be. So guys, God bless you. Thank you so much. I actually look forward to hearing you guys again. Rabbi Hendler, my friend and my teacher. So unbelievable to include us in this. And I'm really grateful to you. And just to everybody, there are a lot of people from our community and from yours who are listening to this. I loved hearing you. And I just wish you Hatzlocha Rabba. Just great. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you for that beautiful bracha, Rabbi Shaw. And Rabbi Gilbert's just going to close off for us. And it doesn't look like there's any questions. I think you guys have shared so much magnificent, beautiful insights and ideas. Sorry?
There are questions, Rabbi.
Have you got questions?
Yeah, I can see questions.
Okay. So here they come. I'm just looking at them now. Okay. So Ross, or Eli, if you can see the questions, Eli, maybe read them out, and then either one of you can choose to answer them. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first one's just a comment. It says, hi, Ross, hello from Hermione Wasserzug. Our parents were friendly and we were at Red Hill together. That's for Ross. Is there a plan to build a mikveh? Yes, there is. It will be at the Abrahamic Center in Abu Dhabi, and it will be launched in about 2022, right? So there will be a formal mikveh. Can I wear yami on the streets? Well, our official answer is you can, but rather wait.
Yeah, the official answer.
So we don't know, following this Israeli issue, this peace treaty, whether, Israelis will be arriving with, their yamis on and walking around with their Star of David and whatever else. Who knows? Let's see. Isn't falling under Sharia law a worry? Remember Cyril Karabas.
So this is a reference to Professor Karabas. And in fact, he was a doctor who did a locum in Dubai, and then was a young girl, unfortunately, died during his time here. And he was convicted in absentia and then arrested when he flew through Dubai. And that story featured very prominently just at the time that Eddie and I were leaving for Dubai. And almost the only thing that South Africans knew about Dubai at the time was Professor Karabas, and obviously it created a very negative impression. But to answer your question, the interesting thing about Dubai for me is that it's quite a traditional country on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's a super first world, nation. And I think it's true that there is some sort of catch up in a certain sense that the traditional legal system is having to do. If you go to courts, it is officially in Arabic, although that's changing now. And actually is about to change in Abu Dhabi, where now it'll also be in English. But if you do go to the judicial system, it actually can be unsettling because it's foreign and it's in Arabic, etc. I do want to mention that the intention of the government, and I actually spoke to the Abu Dhabi Judicial Authority just this week, the intention is that non-Muslims should not be under Sharia law. They completely understand that it doesn't make sense for Jews to fall under Sharia law. And their intention is to create a parallel legal system that is suitable for Jews. They've actually done that for Christians as well. And they've also gone further and said, for people who just want a secular process, that's also okay. We're also going to create that for you. So the system is evolving very, very quickly. Dubai is a young country. It's only 49 years old, just about to turn 50. And this is one of the areas that is progressing very rapidly. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, if you do go to courts and it's all in Arabic, it can be alienating. And that is a reality of being here. You also have to sort of manage that and work with that.
Also, there are different interpretations of Sharia law. I mean, when one hears the word, the term Sharia law, you tend to think of your hands getting chopped off or something like that, but it's the kind of application of Sharia law that is used here is a far more liberal kind of application of the law.
Okay, there's some more questions that have come up. There's one, I know who this is from, but I'm not going to say. Are Ross and Eddie going to move on to Saudi Arabia now that Dubai is in the bag?
So actually, that is my aspiration. I do want to go open Ellie's Kosher Kitchen in Saudi. Yes, it's true.
You've been wearing the mask. That's good preparation for the way the women have to dress over there.
Well, Saudi's changing quickly. And by the way, the irony about wearing masks today is that, I mean, now that we're all walking around wearing masks for COVID, in my head, I have this thing, where I'm thinking to myself, the Muslim woman must be laughing at us. The women that wear the niqab must be laughing at us because they've been doing it for how long, And now we're the ones walking around with it. So.
There's another question here. Is there any contact between yourselves and the Jewish community in Bahrain? There's a small community there.
I mentioned Ambassador Huda Nunu, who's become quite a close personal friend. Just for your information, that community started about 150 years ago. A small group of about 1,000 Iraqi Jews formed that community. It's shrunk in size, but it's still got some very, very famous families, the Nunus, the Kaduris, and they're a beautiful community, and I'm quite close to Huda. So, very happy to facilitate linkages of one kind or another if it's needed.
Okay, here's a question from Corinne. From Karen, where do you get your kosher meat from, if at all?
So we've been bringing it in. People bring it in for us when they travel through. They bring us a bag of meat. So often we get our meat from South Africa. We bring our own meat if we can, if we travel through from wherever we're going. And recently there's a rabbi that has started, a Chabad rabbi who started shechting chickens here. And so there's a limited supply of chickens, and he's also started bringing in meat from the US, but it's not a very reliable source. We run out often. And at the moment, I'm looking at importing for Ellie's Kosher Kitchen and the industry when the flights between Israel and Dubai open, because there's going to be a high demand for that. So kosher meat's going to become more widely available for sure.
Okay, Michelle wants to know, are there any kosher restaurants in Dubai besides Ellie's hangout?
No, there aren't any restaurants, kosher restaurants yet, but I think they're going to happen really quickly. The Burj Khalifa has a kitchen that they've koshered out, and they do serve food from there, but it's not a dedicated kosher restaurant. So,
Okay.
but, yeah.
From Anonymous, can I wear Emirati dress, the white robe and headdress with black robe while visiting? Is this an insult to the locals?
I don't think it's an insult. On the contrary, I think they would have no objection to it whatsoever. I mean, I do want to say that it's a very nice form of sneot. Their faces are uncovered, by the way. But quite a funny story is that when Eddie did actually go to Kosher Fest, we went. I went to buy Eddie an abaya, and Eddie bought this like beautiful long flowing abaya for her sort of role at Kosher Fest, where she was representing the UAE. And the truth is, it's turned into like a beautiful Shabbat dress. You know, it's actually really, really nice. So I don't think they'd be offended. The one time we were at Shul and two guys arrived wearing kandura, that sort of white, long sort of white robe. And we said to them, you know, the locals don't do that. And we said to them, you know, this is a regular Shabbat. It's not Purim. That was our sort of comment to them. But I don't think anybody would be in any way offended if you were to wear the local dress.
Okay. Just a comment here from Corinne. She says, Dubai sounds amazing. Shukar for all that you guys have done for the community and wishing you Hatzlocha going forward. So that doesn't need to be answered. Gary Bress says, I lived in Dubai and Abu Dhabi for over 2 years. As far as wearing kippah, best to wear it under the cap for the time being. Just a comment, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely, we have been sneered, I would say. And in the past, we've encouraged people not to wear kippot, but to wear other forms of head covering. But I always like to say not yet, because I know for a fact that there will be a time when we'll be very willing to wear a kippot out in the street and in the Mall of the Emirates, etc. And we haven't done it yet because we've sort of had to be taking baby steps. But with this huge leap forward, I think maybe it would be appropriate to start wearing kippot. I had a great chat with one of our Jewish members who's living in Oman, and he says he wears his tzitzit with one set of strings out. Not all four, just one. And I thought that was really sweet. But basically, we are bringing our Chanukah out now. Previously, they had been in the house. Now that we're bringing them out to our front windows. And that's a very, very exciting moment. And I guess that will extend to everything, kippot, tzitzit, and all the other obvious signs of Jewish identity.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much, guys. Rabbi Gilbert, won't you sign off and wish us all good evening?
Thank you very much to everyone involved. A big thank you to Rabbi Hendler, to the Krills. Thank you for sharing your life in Dubai and what you've had to go through, and chizuk for the South African community. We don't realize how we live and the opportunities that we have, even though we've got lots of cons by living in South Africa. There are pros that we can express ourselves in the way that we can. But just to see what you guys have done and how you've been moist and nefesh, you've given a lot to be there. And just to bless you, Hashem should bless you in all that you do. And He should give you bracha and hatzlocha to you and your entire family, to your community. And that please God, that you should continue to share the light of Torah and mitzvahs and Yiddishkeit. And we should have a beautiful Rosh Hashanah, Yomim Narayim, and a extended Sukkot and Simchas Torah for everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Shaw, Rabbi Goldstein, and thank you for having the honor to be able to host you. And please God, we should do this regularly and hear only good things from Dubai. And even if we can't express ourselves externally, the Pneumius is all there. And wishing you all a very, very good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Lalatov. Thank you. Amen.